Okay, we are recording.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Women in Gambling, with Robby Fuqua. I always say your name wrong, Robby. Is it Fuqua?
Fuqua. Believe me, I've heard it of all times, but yes, you were right on. Yes.
Okay. My name is much easier to pronounce. I'm Lori Manson, and I'm the Problem Gambling Services Coordinator at AdCare. We're really happy to present this webinar today in collaboration with the Maine Council on Problem Gambling, with funding from the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We had 163 people register for today's webinar, and about half of you are from Maine, and the other half come from 12 other states in Canada. So we're really happy to welcome you all today to this webinar. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. For today's webinar, we're taking attendance in order to provide you with a certificate of continuing education credit for participating. So after the training is over, we'll run a Zoom report of those of you who participated and how long you were logged in. So please stay with us the whole time, as it will impact your certificate. Also, do me a favor, if you could click on that participant button and see if you see your name, that's great, because that means I also can see your name. But if you don't see your name there, I'd suggest shooting me an email just to let me know how you participated. If it was like, sometimes I see a phone number or I see just a device name and I can't match that up with a person's name. So after today's webinar, I'll email you a link to a really short evaluation. We appreciate your feedback. It helps us understand what you liked and what you found useful, as well as how we can improve this experience for future participants. And I will email you the certificate for this webinar within 5 business days. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you don't receive it by this time next week. And I know a lot of you were on Jody's webinar last week. You'll be getting that certificate shortly after we get done with today's webinar, in case you were wondering. Please notice the chat button on your Zoom controls, and also there's a question and answer area button as well. You can use those to communicate with us during the webinar, and I'll be monitoring it. If you're having trouble with that feature or you don't have access to it, just shoot me an email, because I'll also be monitoring my email. So we're really pleased to have Robby with us today. Robby's the Training and Program Manager of the Responsible Gambling Department at Morneau-Shepell. And I mentioned this last time we had Robby a couple weeks ago, but I participated in a webinar about a year ago that was put on by an organization in California. And at that time, I made a note to add him to my wish list of presenters to bring here to Maine. So we don't have him physically here today, but we're really glad to have you here with us virtually, Robby, and we hope to see you sometime in the future. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. Thank you for that nice introduction again. And thank you, Maine Council on Problem Gambling. Thank you, AdCare of Maine, as well, for having us to speak on today's subject matter, women and gambling. And I really enjoyed our last talk. I had some great questions, even prior to the last presentation that we did, gambling in the prison system. I really enjoyed presenting that information, and this one I find very interesting as well. So we look forward to providing you the information today. Now, as I say this, Scott, Lori, if you guys need to break in for whatever reason during my talk today, just crack in at any time for any technology difficulties or challenges or anything that you need to know during this talk today. I'm kind of excited. I mean, we're going to do 3 poll questions, and you said it so eloquently about your CEUs. I need to write down how you position it to our participants today. But yeah, we're going to have 3 polling questions, and I'm actually going to, fingers crossed, going to play a video today as well. That's kind of an introduction video to women in gambling, so you can kind of get a visual representation of what I'm going to be sharing with you today with women in gambling and women in problem gambling as well. And I might even at this point in time too, I'd love to say hi to everybody face to face. Here I am. Good to see you guys again, and we are ready to go. So later on in my talk, when I do play the video, I'm going to stop share and then reshare to just take a second, because in order to do this, I have to go into virtual darkness again. But I do like to present so that you guys can see me as I present. And yeah, so let's get started. A little bit about myself and the company that I work for. My name is, again, Robby Fuqua. I'm a LCSW license in the state of Illinois. I'm an LICSW license in the state of Massachusetts. So yes, I'm close to Maine, although I know we have callers from all over today. So I'm excited. And I love hearing those numbers too, Lori, 163. I think the last number I saw that we're on at this point in time, we're a little bit over 100. So we're happy to have everybody. I've got my MSW from Boston College, and I am broadcasting here out of Boston, here on the East Coast, close to Maine, as I was saying. My background is in clinical work, or excuse me, crisis clinical work in hospital settings, and also, of course, addictions. When I started with this company, our company, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in a quick sec. I was working the lines as a clinical associate, serving the problem gamblers who called in, assessing, screening, and then I had a caseload as well that we've got phone counseling programs that we offer the states that we serve as well. So I worked those lines and I worked those states, and I'm a career changer, so I changed careers to go into addictions. So I gravitated our company is a lot of it, the work we do is EAP. So I kind of gravitated towards the gamblers. It fascinated me. I didn't know a whole lot about gambling disorder or even problem gambling when I first started. But I still to this day, and I want to serve and help those who suffer from this addiction or any addiction really. So my background in business, my undergrad's actually from the University of North Texas. If you hear my twang, that's because I'm from Texas originally. I was in business, so I was a corporate trainer. So my employer picked up on that. I got to go out and do some talks and work in the department, and now I am the training specialist for Morneau Chappelle for the responsible gambling department. Now, there's my contact information. Jot down my phone number. Feel free to call me. There's my email. If you want to talk about problem gambling, if you have questions about this webinar or any others, because I get to work with subject matter experts in this field, leading researchers in this field. And because not only do I get to conduct some of these talks, we write some curriculum in Morneau Chappelle regarding responsible gambling, but also again, I get to work with some of the leading researchers and experts in this field too. But I have to facilitate and put all these together and manage this. But sometimes I get to present like last time and today, which I'm very grateful to be able to do.
Hey, Robby, I'm going to just break in for one quick second.
Sure.
Because my email
no
and the chat's going crazy. I made a mistake. I didn't realize that they cannot see the participant tab that I see. So,
okay.
So looking for their name was putting them on this wild goose chase. So folks, just don't worry about that. I have most people's names. I'll be sending out the eval email probably around between 4 and 5 today. So if you don't get that, that may be a sign that I didn't know you were on this list today. And so that would be a good time to reach out to me. So anyway, I'm going to mute myself again and sit here with my red face from being a little bit embarrassed by that mistake.
No, you're fine, Lori, and I feel your pain, if you will. So some of the states that we do serve with the lines that we serve, I'm about to tell you a little bit about it. But yeah, with CUs and getting credit, I understand, and with evaluation, so crack in at any time that you need. So a little bit again about us. We work helplines across the nation. Several states. We provide trainings like this webinar with our retailers and both providers. We do responsible gambling and gaming trainings, or we have in casinos. We also provide prevention programming, research, and white papers, and work with GameSense and responsible gaming information centers globally. So again, Morneau Chappelle also does HR solutions. We also do a lot of EAP work. Our gambling department is small but strong. Yeah, so we serve several different states, and we are very happy to be presenting this material today to Maine and the Maine Council. So, okay, so let's get right to it. Let's get started with our objectives for today's session. First, we're going to look to understand the different characteristics between males and females when it comes to gambling, including the differences in prevalence rates. And I'm going to go over a little bit of recent history on what we're seeing with how that's kind of moving and changing with our time as far as female gamblers and the growth that we're seeing that call in on our helplines. Then we're going to look at the different reasons and motivating factors amongst the two genders, the two genders of being male and female. And this is going to lead us to a quick review on escape gambling, which we know from research and work in our field that this is primarily made up, escape gamblers, of females. In escape gambling, which leads me to our second objective, we're going to cover a couple of strategies built around the electronic gambling or electronic gaming machine industry that potentially, I think, exasperates those distortions that are inherent with gambling disorder, which leads to vulnerable individuals playing these games for hours, sometimes days on end on the very acute cases. We'll then look at 3 specific areas of growth into the gambling industry, which have catered, I think, to escape gamblers, which perhaps might help us explain why some studies have reported growing prevalence rates of female gambling when compared to their male gambling counterparts. Now, that's just something that I have seen because part of my job is managing the report. So I see the genders and the growth rates of both, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. Then we're going to talk about facts and characteristics that make up a general female gambler profile, which includes a discussion of a concept known as the telescoping effect. I don't know if you know about that, but that's one of our learning objectives. I'll talk more on that near the end of today's presentation. And then finally, the last piece we're going to talk about the role of trauma and how trauma plays in with female escape gamblers. And I think trauma can play into action type of gamblers too. And I'm going to talk more about action and escape here in a couple of minutes if you're new to this. I mean, I know on this call today, we probably have folks who serve this population and those who don't. Some of this might be a review for you. Some of this might be new helpful information for you. Either way, I hope this is information that you can serve the problem gambling population and their loved ones in a positive way, right? To deal with this nasty condition or disease or disorder, whatever you want to call this thing. And either if you serve in Maine or anywhere in the nation in your practices or your agencies, we hope this information will serve you well, right? Okay, so when we look at prevalence rates, historically speaking, studies have pretty much shown gambling disorder as being a male-dominated condition. Now, some of you are saying, "Whoa, Robbie, I don't know. I've seen some changes." Well, I have too, and I'm going to tell you about them here in a minute. What I've seen behind the numbers of folks who call in on our gambling helplines, but for the most part, historically, we've seen perhaps, and this is just from past research, a 2-to-1 ratio men to women, then reportedly being 2 to 3 times higher, than men are. Women compulsive gamblers reporting to make up 1/3 of this population, while men compulsive gamblers making up 2/3, right? But are the times changing? When I'm just talking about the 2 genders of females and males and those numbers that are connected to this, right? Here are some other studies that I resource suggesting that there's some recent changes with the female population. One thing I will tell you is the gap between women and male gamblers is shrinking. Let's take Illinois, for instance. Illinois is one of our gambling. We've got a big hub set in Chicago where our folks answer these lines. And with Illinois, what I've seen is it's almost looking like it's almost 50-50. Now, you have to remember with the gambling helpline, females are more apt to reach their hands out to find help before a male will. So with saying that, you could say it's somewhat biased. But I will tell you, lately, it's been shrinking, male to female. And I'm even saying 52 to 48%, 52% being male. So we've seen that gap getting smaller. Also, recent research indicates that women are now just as likely to gamble as men. And actually, gamblers aged from 45 to 64 women actually outnumber men. With women, especially with gambling disorder, escape type of gambling, there's a later onset that we see. When I was working the lines, when I had a caseload, I think there at the end, all my clients, all my caseload were escape female gamblers, older adult population. So it's growing, okay? I feel the population is growing, and what we're seeing in our numbers anyways with the states that we report for and that we operate their lines. Now, Here's some reasons that I put together, okay? Some potential reasons of why perhaps these numbers, female gamblers, are growing. Studies indicate that women opt for legal gambling venues with more legal gambling options that are opening up now, including sports gambling. Everything that's opening up, I think that's a better chance for women to jump on and to start gambling. And there's a chance perhaps with this, you know, it's not a risk-free activity, as Dr. Lori Rugel states. It's not, gambling is not risk-free. I mean, you know, there's a potential for a disorder to develop or an addiction to so there's a better chance for more women, problem gamblers, to perk up. The specific also gambling venue expansion that matches up with the profile or vulnerabilities of a female escape gambler. Again, I'm going to talk about escape and action gamblers here in a second. And these are casinos, the technological advances of the electronic gambling or gaming machine. When you see EGM, that's the acronym for electronic gaming or gambling machine. Slot machines, an example of one. Online gambling growth, absolutely, especially during COVID. And more options regarding lottery games, scratch-offs, and other non-strategy types of gambling. A third reason lies behind the increased marketing and advertising efforts of the different gambling venues towards our women gamblers, right? They're in business, and they're seeing the numbers as well. And when you see an increase towards one market, you know that they see that train coming as well. Now, one study in the UK indicated the casino and poker websites are implementing female-friendly gimmicks such as Barbie pink color schemes which attract female gamblers. And finally, with women's increased earning power and financial independence from male spouses, they are more apt to try these venues that historically have attracted males, like sports betting, right? Like fantasy sports, all these, because of the shift in today's world with the female gender. Hey, look, my household is included with this. My wife is the bread earner. She's an executive, and I'm fine with that. I love that. But with that shift in today's society, in our country anyways, you know, a lot of female gamblers are saying, hey, I want to look at what the boys are doing here. Let's see, sports gambling, fantasy sports. So we're seeing a shift. They're not just picking the escape gambling venues anymore. So all those, more legalized gambling, specific gambling venue expansions with casinos that house these games that are more, that really connect with those vulnerabilities of escape gambling. The gambling venues exclusively now, not exclusively, but being concentrated with the marketing efforts to match the women's preferences and women's changes where they're at in today's world with their increased earning power. Now they're wanting to do more than just jump on a slot machine. They're more interested in all types of gambling. So with this page, we're focusing on those gambling venues that actually cater again to escape gambling. You know, like casinos, they house slot machines and other EGMs that kind of connect to the escape type of gambling where, you know, they can sit in front of a machine for hours and sometimes days on end. Now, full transparency, all this is from an older study, okay? These numbers have grown, okay? So at the time, I think it was 2010, it reportedly, casinos generated 137.5 billion, that's billion, not million, annually with Native American casinos in 28 states at the time. Racetrack casinos operated in 14 states and land-based riverboat casinos in 17 states. In Illinois alone, because that's one of the lines that we operate, they're adding 6 casinos this year. They're combining their racetracks with their casinos, making them what we call racinos. So all those things are going down. So there's still just crazy growth. In Nevada alone at the time, there were nearly 200,000 machines. This same source quoted 830,000 electronic gambling machines nationally, with casinos reporting these machines making 70% up of the total revenue for casinos. By the way, the revenue margins on casinos are huge. That's part of the reason why if you go into a casino today, you're seeing them take up more and more floor space because of the larger margins that a lot of casinos get from these games, right? That's by strategy. And finally, looking at online gambling growth, it's grown to there were 2,000 websites in 2010, with Cascade, an online gambling website, said that 80% of their audience was female. And although officially, actually, online gambling is illegal in most states, it's heavily advertised in the U.S. and you can get to it one way or the other, right? You can go to something that's based in Europe. So so why are the particular gambling venues so attractive to our female gamblers, do you think? Well, for one, remember that female gamblers or escape gamblers, and again, I'm going to talk about this in a second more. They like to numb out. They don't like to feel. If you're a male or a female escape gambler, but a lot of female escape gamblers, of course, they just want to escape. Escape gambling reminds me a lot of substance use disorders or substance addiction. It's not so much like an action gambler where there's the motivator's money, the motivator's competition, it's the motivator's adrenaline. With escape gamblers, it's about numbing out, okay? So it's particularly easy to isolate at home, online, or even in a casino. You can find a dark corner to play your favorite machine in a casino, and casinos are generally safe places where a female gambler can remain anonymous while playing into Oblivion for sometimes days. And of course, it's even easier when gambling, when you can gamble in your home. Right? I mean, online gambling, especially during COVID, if you can stay in your pajamas and gamble, right? And then you can, let's go outside of COVID, even before the pandemic, you could still gamble, get the kids off to school and have dinner ready if you are a housewife, a female gambler in a young family, and be able to juggle everything while still gambling at home. So online gambling, provides that type of convenience as well. So the growth of online gambling websites, along with a wider, variety, of gambling machine types with recent casino growth, definitely plays a part in the number of female gamblers in the U.S. and beyond. So, I feel a responsibility to speak on the pandemic and gambling and the effect that how is this? Because I had to think about this. Is this affecting the female gambler? In an indirect way, of course it is. I think COVID's, somehow affecting everything we do, right? As we move into June now. But so I resourced this and found this with online gambling, as you can see, is increasing, obvious reasons, while our casino business is decreasing. But, here with Massachusetts, I know I can almost see a casino here in Charlestown where I live from where I'm at. And it's about to open. And so casinos are going to start opening, but right now they're seeing, of course, a huge downfall. In New Jersey, online gaming revenues increased by 65.7% from year over year March. And then their casino business has been down year over year, 61.7%. Full transparency, I know March 16th is when they shut down there, but still 61% decrease. Pennsylvania, they've been earning $24.3 million since the summer last year, and year over year they've lost $12 million in casino revenues. Okay, something to think about. So the casino business is down for obvious reasons. So it's going to open up, and I even saw a story on CNN. It might have been last week or the week before, how they're going to do the social distancing, which I commend them. They're, like Caesars, I think it was in Vegas. The general manager was showing that they're going to turn one machine on, right? Literally powered it on, and then three machines they're not going to power on, and then what would it be, the fourth or fifth machine they're going to power on. That is to make sure that social distancing is happening with our our slot machines, EGMs in the casinos. That's just one example of how they're doing social distancing. But think about that. Will this change? I mean, think about a gambler, especially a problem gambler. Are they going to want to go through all that? Or once they taste a little bit of online gambling, are they going to stay customers of online gambling and prefer that? Will this change moving forward? Who knows? Another article I read was a lot of gamblers are going to still go back to the casinos because they love just being there. They love, the anonymity. You can be anonymous in there mixed with you know, just the rush that you get going into a casino that perhaps might be their social platform that they use while they, you know, gamble. And then also the quick money, being able to go and get the money in your hand after you win it versus online gambling, it might be more delayed. So that you have to think about too. But I think online gambling might have a larger presence now. I also looked up this as well as online searches. And online casino betting and online poker searches win here. Online poker searches over the last 30 days are up almost 400%. Now, I think this was written in mid-April, so it was mid-March to mid-April, somewhere in there. Over the last 30 days, online bingo surged over 400%. Sports betting's gone down over the last 30 days, and again, that was from mid-March to mid-April. It's gone down about 35% because why? Sports isn't going down. Although there's talk now it might start back up, but right now it's down. Online casino searches, some other trends. It searches about 3.5 times out of online sports betting. 20% more people search for online casinos than online poker, and 75% more people search when it's compared to online poker. And again, online poker searches double that of online betting searches. So how's that connected to female gamblers? Again, what we see, and a lot of times, a lot of our female gamblers, especially the older adult population female gamblers, are escape gamblers. Most of the escape gambling is done online and at casinos, and that's the movement within this segment of this industry. It's basically right here, right? Let's see if this is going to change moving forward, even as the casinos open back up. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about male versus female gambling. And with, you know, along with prevalence rates, the reported motivations for and reasons for gambling are a little bit different or can be different amongst the genders, the two genders anyways. Natasha Dow-Scholl, cultural anthropologist here at MIT, reports that men gamble for a cocaine-like rush while women, for the most part, gamble for a methadone-like numbness. Some additional different gender expressions of gambling include that men are more attracted to the risk-taking and competitive aspect of gambling, and also the status that can come with winning the more skill-based games like poker, fantasy sports, and sports betting. But with women, it's a little bit different. They are more drawn in by the escape and avoidance factor of gambling. They are also attracted to the social component that can come with playing chance-based games. Chance-based games like the lottery, like slot machines, and other EGMs. And I know from my experience, again, as I said earlier, when I was working my caseload, most of my folks, if not all of them, were female gamblers, older adult population, escape gamblers. And I remember one of my last ones, I think, she said, and this was in Chicago. This is when I was working out of Chicago. And she said, she goes, Robby, I just don't know where I'm going to get a good steak dinner now. And I just wanted to say, look, ma'am, you're in Chicago. There are some of the best, I think, best steakhouses in the world are in Chicago. But really what she was saying was she was connecting the social piece of gambling to her gambling, right? Now that could develop into a problem, and she was calling a line, so something was going on, right? So that's how it starts. It's kind of like almost like drinking and substance addictions. You know, a lot of folks who have alcohol use disorder, they start off drinking and, you know, socially, and they go to the bar with friends, and then it becomes an isolating event. It's the same thing with gambling disorder. I see it in the casinos. You know, you go in the casinos, you see, and it's a sad thing to see. You can see the people, men and women, that sit in front of the machines sometimes for days, hours. Of course, the days are few and far between, but they are out there. So, okay, so that brings us to our first poll question, which I am going to launch. And it's a true or false question. And it asks, and I just went over this, easy money here. True or false? Female gamblers usually prefer skill-based types of games, such as poker. Mark A if it's true, or B if it's false. According to what we've talked about so far, female gamblers usually prefer skill-based types of games, such as poker. Is this true or is this false? Or do they like non-skill-based games, like slot machines? Hint, hint. We got 80%. 101 have voted. I'll give it a minute. How am I doing? Oh gosh, I need to move a little bit quicker. 12:31. Okay. T minus 5. Okay, the answer is false. They usually prefer the non-skill-based games. And I'm going to talk about why that is with escape gamblers, right? Let's get into that now. This is problem gambling 101. This is one of the first things I learned, you know. And listen, I go to conferences, national conferences, state conferences, and I hear sometimes, even from experts, I'm going to be honest with you, that the action and the escape gamblers and antiquated topology that I still think it's relevant. I'm telling you, answering the lines, and I will say this, not all women are escape gamblers. Not all men are action gamblers. You can become one. Can you be both at the same time? Can there be shade? Can there be gray? Absolutely. But this kind of gives you a nice template to kind of look at and to help you in treatment planning, to help you in assessing, maybe even to help you screen. But I still think this is relevant today. With action seekers, they're usually younger males, competitive. They usually run in, wolf packs, right? The movie Hangover reference. But they usually hang together. There's some narcissism sometimes here. And again, not all these traits are every time, right? But a lot of times what studies have shown, you see this, money's the principal relapse issue, competitiveness. Sometimes there's a criminal element, maybe a little access to in there, antisocial personality disorder. But when you walk into a casino, you're going to hear roars. And a lot of times, if not most of the times, those roars are from crap tables from those young 20-somethings, winning, rolling, a 7 or whatever. I don't still understand craps to this day. But sometimes it can be someone winning a jackpot. But if you move over to the slot machine area, again, which are growing, the EGM machine areas in casinos, you're going to see mostly females. You'll still see males. I know that. But a lot of the escape gamblers are older onset, predominantly female. It's non-competitive. A lot of times there's something with the problem escape gambler or someone who's suffering from gambling disorder, and their gambling is mostly of the escape type, sitting in front of the non-strategy type of games. Emotion is usually, there's some type of trigger, emotional trigger. It's either heaven forbid, some type of bereavement issue. It can be an empty nest issue. It can be a divorce issue. Unfortunately, the older we get in life, the more that we lose a lot of times. So this is just a way that an escape gambler deals with it, and a female escape gambler. Some of the studies have shown this. Now, again, escape gambling, some people say, hey man, this is the old way to look at it, but I still think there's some relevance here. With escape gamblers, they tend to lose awareness of time, money lost, people around them. And what this is saying is how much money they lost. And really, money's not the issue. When an escape gambler wins, it's not about, hey, I'm making a lot of money. It's, hey, I can play longer. With escape gamblers, it's not so much a money issue that brings somebody to their knees or hits their bottom. It's the amount of time that they're spending in the casino or online playing that's taking them out of their lives, taking them out of their families' lives, taking them out of functioning. Listen, we are unbiased, gambling unbiased at Morneau Chappelle. I am personally. We're not for or against it. We're just here to serve those who have the problem. But I will tell you, anything that's done that's going to take you out of those, of functioning as a being happy and being able to live a healthy life, is when it becomes addiction is what we want to serve. And when these things happen, that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do, right? Now, one study showed 95% of women who escape gamblers. I think that's a little high. There's another study I'm going to show you near the end of this that show that 73% of women of escape gamblers are actually are women. It's an escape gambler uses it as a coping mechanism to forget about some trauma, something emotionally that's happened in their life. It can be recent, it can be past trauma, as I'm going to cover this one study. It's used to help with their mood management, and it's helped to escape or soothe or reduce their stress and help them distract them from what's going on in their life. Again, either if it's from something traumatic that happened in the past, or if it's something that's going on now. Maybe the kids went to college, you name it. So now, when we speak of female gamblers and escape gambling, I mean, I've talked a lot about the psyche, the typology of an escape gambler. And do you think the cause of sitting in front of a machine on hours on end, sometimes days, lie within the psyche of someone who suffers from this? Or do you think this is strategic in the design of the game? I think it's a little bit of both, but I do know a lot of it's from the design of the game, okay? Um, the designers of this game, a lot of them come from our field, by the way. They know what dopamine does. I don't think they're out to make folks sick. I don't think they're out to, have, women develop, or men develop pathology, or, develop gambling disorder. But I do think it's their goal to make as much money as they can. And collateral damage to that is addiction. Okay. So I think their goal is to get people in the zone here. If you read this quote, there is a zone that folks get into, especially those who suffer from gambling disorder, when it's a diagnosable condition that everything else shuts down, and that's what they shoot for, is that zone. So they can just numb out from whatever life is bringing them at the time, right? And I think the gambling industry is a business, and some of the collateral damage that comes from that is the addiction. I don't think they're out to kill people, but at the same time, they want to keep someone in front of the machine that designs these games. They want to keep them in the machine as long as they can, right? There's two basic strategies I'm going to go over today. Two real basic ones that I'll talk about real quickly here. One is the near miss effect. Now, if you've ever played a slot machine, you've probably seen this, right? This is where 2 out of the 3 the outcomes match with the remaining near miss position, right? Now, what does this say? What does the screen say to you? What I see is, hey, Robby, you didn't just lose, you just almost won. That's what this screen tells me, right? So, and this is by strategy, by the way. Now, this produces the similar physiology of our physiological effect regarding dopamine transmitting pathways as the anticipation reward processing is actually winning. I believe, don't quote me, but I believe I read somewhere that this actually, you're more apt to hit the button again on something like this versus even winning, okay? Now, the post-reinforcement pause that occurs after a win, studies show that the longer you pause after a win, that you pause longer after a win than a loss. And the same effect happens after this as well, which in turn means the greater chances of the gambler staying in front of that machine to extend their play. Now think about that. All shucks, I just missed it. I almost won. I didn't lose, I almost won, versus the perception of not even being in the ballpark of a win. What do you think is going to happen? There's no way I'm going to win this. You're going to walk away. But if you think you're almost winning, you're going to stay, right? The other one is the losses disguised as wins, okay? Along with the near miss effect, this is another one. Basically, this involves the electronic gambling machine producing the same bells and whistles from a loss that it does a win. This in turn confuses the brain and the physiological response of the body to thinking it's actually winning when in reality it's actually losing. You put $1 in a machine, it kicks out 50 cents. Did you win or lose? I always say that in a workshop, and people think about that. It's easy, you lose. Think about that compounded with bells and whistles going off. You won. Your body, it's kind of like the wind's blowing you towards one, but that didn't really actually happen, okay? You mix in pathology and you mix in distortion from a mental health disorder like gambling disorder, and you have this going on, they're more apt to stay in front of that machine, right? So while both the near miss effect and the losses disguised as win features are intended to extend play amongst patrons, we think it's important, us as clinicians, to have that perspective of the features or the strategy of this game, right? So that we know when we're working with a gambler or someone who just, you know, lost their husband or their spouse or their wife, and they're starting to spend hours in the casino, we know about just two of these. These are just two of the strategies that the industry, you know, takes or makes to make sure that they keep their customers in front of the machines. Okay, so that brings us to our second poll question that I will launch now. And it asks, this is one of those Sesame Street questions, which one does it belong? Okay, all of the following are characteristics of an escaped gambler except. Which one doesn't fit with an escaped gambler's profile? Is it A, they're non-competitive? Is it B, that they prefer games of choice? Is it C, that they're addicted to adrenaline rush? Is it D, that they're predominantly female? Or is it E, all the above are true? Which one doesn't fit with an escaped gambler? That's the way I probably should have worded it. A, is it that they're non-competitive? Is it B, they prefer games of chance? Is it C, that they're addicted to adrenaline rush? Is it D, that they're predominantly female? Or is it E, all the above are true? Okay, we're arriving at 72%, 73% voted. Excuse me. Let's see if we can get to 100 here. Okay. The answer is C. That one doesn't fit, right? So all they're, you know, escape gamblers, it's a non-competitive thing. They prefer games of chance. Remember, because they want to numb out. They're predominantly female. And, but what doesn't fit is that they're addicted to adrenaline rush, pretty much, right? Okay. All right, good job, guys. And let's keep moving. I'm watching the clock here. Okay. So I've got a quick video I want to show you. So in order to do that, I have to go into virtual darkness. So, and I'm gonna change my share screen too, which will take a second. The reason I'm showing you this video is because it's a very good general introduction so that you can get a visual of what a female gambler looks like, okay? And then we'll get into the last two sections of today's talk. Bear with me.
Whether it's in a casino or online, poker and other games of chance are becoming increasingly popular. It's not just men who are addicted. A growing number of women are becoming compulsive gamblers, too. Early Show national correspondent Hattie Kaufman takes a closer look at the troubling trend.
The reality is the longer that you gamble compulsively, which is what I was doing, the more you become a compulsive liar.
In the 1980s, Melanie Morgan was a successful television anchor.
Good morning, it's 7:25.
Until her gambling addiction cost her job and nearly destroyed her marriage.
I would lie about where I was going, what I was doing, who I was with, how much money I was spending.
Even her pregnancy did not stop Melanie from gambling.
Of course, I was in a terrible environment, smoke-filled rooms, hardly taking care of myself. Yeah, I was gambling right up until an hour before I gave birth.
After her son was born, she often left the infant with an assortment of babysitters.
I remember packing up the baby one day and driving around to each of the card rooms where I thought she might be, and finally locating her and taking the baby in its carrier and putting the baby in the middle of the poker table and saying, you got a choice. You want to play cards? Or do you want to be a mom?
I knew at that point I was in desperate trouble. I knew I was sick. I was sick and needed help. And I still didn't want to stop.
You might think the opportunity to gamble nonstop would be limited to a trip to Vegas or Atlantic City, but the temptation is everywhere. Visit here in Phoenix and you'll be greeted with the Arizona Casino Guide listing 22 casinos, horse racing, dog racing, bingo, and more.
I won $10,000 playing bingo. It just hooks you right in. Slot machines.
Mine wasn't slots, it was draw poker.
I sat down with 3 women in recovery from compulsive gambling: Shannon, Frida, and Vicky. Do you have any idea how much money you lost to gambling?
I lost $300,000. It was all of my retirement money.
I had thought it was like around $35,000, but my husband stated it was closer to $50,000.
It was between $150,000 and $200,000.
And Frida lost more than that. She lost a year of her life when she went to prison after stealing cash to gamble.
The sick compulsive gambler will do whatever they have to do to gamble.
It makes me think of drug addicts who steal in order to get the drugs.
It's an addiction. It is an addiction.
Psychologist Paul Good says it used to be that most women gambled to escape their everyday lives. But now more are simply lured by the action.
A sense of excitement, of being on the edge, that you are literally holding your fate in your own hands at a poker table. For a woman, that can be a very powerfully riveting experience.
Is it a high? Is it euphoria?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Especially when you hear the bells
It's like
ringing.
a drug.
According to the National Council on Problem Gambling, 20 years ago, only a handful of those seeking help for a gambling addiction were women. Now, almost half are female.
You are going to see gambling take its place alongside alcoholism and drug abuse as being one of the most significant addictions of our time.
How hard was it for you to walk into a group and say, I'm one of you?
It was very difficult because it takes a tremendous amount of courage. I thought that I would find people that, you know, would be filled with tattoos. They weren't going to be like me. But everybody was like me. Everybody was just like me.
With treatment and regular attendance at a 12-step program, all of these women have their lives back.
They're right here in San Francisco at
And
Fiore.
Melanie Morgan has a broadcast career again. She hasn't gambled in 14 years, but she knows it's just one day at a time.
One bet, that's all it takes, and I could instantly be back in that place that I was before.
And in fact, every one of these women has relapsed at least once. Even after hitting bottom.
And after not gambling for 10 years.
Despite the fact you'd spent a year in prison.
That's right.
So every day without gambling is celebrated.
Today I'm at a day 100.
Today you have 100
days. Yeah.
Does she get an applause for that?
Yes.
For the Yearly Show, Hattie Kaufman, CBS News, Phoenix.
Now, all of the women told Hattie they shared their story to help others.
All right, great. So okay, I guess you guys can still hear me. Okay, so yeah, now with women, it is more, let me see, let me make sure that I'm still on here.
Hey,
Lori,
Robby,
can you hear me?
We can hear you. The only thing that's not a huge deal is there's like a black bar going across the top of the slides now. It's almost like something is still.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You know what? That should go away, and I apologize about that.
Okay.
I had that too. Yeah. You know what? It was funny. I couldn't hear anything in my ears. So, okay. But thank you for checking in. And if it doesn't go away, just break in again. I think it's at the top, right, Lori?
Yeah, it's gone away now.
Okay. Perfect.
So
okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I did want to show you that video because it kind of gives you, again, kind of a visual representation of their presentation of those three women. And a lot of those women, some of them, they were action gamblers, right? And it became an issue with money. But I wanted you to see that video. We play that in our workshops. But, with women, a lot of times it's a later onset with a faster progression, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. There's a term for that. They prefer less competitive games, as I've said earlier. And they opt for the legal betting with fewer legal problems, lower bets, longer plays, and a lot of times it's because of an emotional trigger of some type or some type of emotional loss. There's higher rates of depression and anxiety, with mood disorders and, with those symptoms. There's a higher rate of physical health problems, and that's almost obvious too, because especially with escape gambling, you're in front of the machine for long periods of time, not moving. Some of the, some gambling games, of course, get your heart rates up. So yeah, and with a later onset, you mix all that in, there's a lot of health problems. You know, with younger female gamblers, there are big chances. I'm doing a talk for another state here in a couple of days about intimate partner violence and the domestic violence. You mix that in with what's happening with the pandemic, it can be, you know, it can be a dangerous situation because of the tie that money has with it. Okay. And with intimate partner violence and problem gambling, a lot of the times it's bidirectional, which means the gambler is sometimes the perpetrator, but they're also sometimes the victim. They're also more likely to have a family history of alcohol use disorder, and there is a high incidence of, with female gamblers, childhood trauma that I'm going to talk about here in a second. Now, here's the telescoping effect. This is one of our learning objectives of today, and that's the later onset, faster progression thing. You know, the thing is, the idea behind this is that women develop their problem at a much faster rate than men, 9 years compared to 13 years men respectively, right? So, and I've read studies where it's even faster for women when you compare it to men. So there's something going on there. It might be because it's an emotional trigger. I don't know. But they develop the problem much quicker. It's good for you if you serve this population, or if you're about to start working with problem gamblers, to be able to, you know, talk about this with your female gamblers, and so that you can, as their clinician and, you know, or case manager, you can keep an eye on their progression. Just make sure that you check in with them if they're still gambling when they see you, how those amounts are moving, or if they are progressing. But likely, if they have this disorder, it will progress much faster than with males, and that's what we call the telescope effect. And that brings us to our third and final poll question number 3. And it asks, which of the following are strategies or features of electronic gaming machines intended to prolong play amongst gamblers? Is it A, the near miss effect? Is it B, particular sound patterns or codes that the machines produce? Is it C, losses disguised as wins? Or is it D, both A and C, the near miss effect and losses disguised as wins? Or is it E, none of the above? Which of the following are strategies or features of electronic gaming or gambling machines like slot machines that are intended to prolong play amongst gamblers? Is it A, near miss effect? Is it B, sound patterns or codes that the machines are programmed to send out? Or is it C, losses disguised as wins? Or is it D, both A and C, the near miss effect and losses disguised as wins? Or is it E, none of the above? Oh, good. We're up about 70%. Let me check my time here. Okay, I'm going to have to end polling. We're getting close. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, it was both A and C, the near miss effect and losses disguised as wins are two examples of some features that we covered today with slot machines. Okay, or EGMs, electronic gambling and gaming machines. Okay, all right, folks, I'm going to kind of shoot through this so we can end on time here, and perhaps I've seen that we've had texts and questions. But real quickly, here are reasons to escape gamblers: marital problems, emptiness, grief, financial problems, and childhood trauma. Now, this is a study that, again, my colleague Jenny Opels, that still works with us, she found that I think is great, and involved 5 themes. They only worked with women gamblers and that had suffered some type of trauma in their life, and they came up with 5 themes. Okay, one was the not good enough self. The second one was the seduction and intoxication phase. The third was seeking a sanctuary. The fourth was the trauma that ties the bind, and the fifth where the gambling becomes the trauma. Now, the not good enough self theme is, you know, I don't work with, and I don't claim to, as far as working with folks with PTSD or any type of trauma related, but you know, disorders or you know, issues or problems that they're having. But I do know, you know, trauma can affect the identity development. It can stop or alter, you know, the identity and how it develops. So a lot of times gamblers look at these gambling personas so that they can take that on to replace or to complement, or well, really not to complement, but to take the place of that identity that was affected by that horrible thing that happened to them. This particular gambler says, you know, it's about glam. You're like somebody else. You feel like somebody else. So a lot of gamblers like to find this persona, you know, and attached to that. And then the seduction intoxication stage, it's almost an innocent activity. And it's just not the gambling. It's everything that seduces folks. You know, even when I go into, still to this day, if I go into a casino, there's something about it. The music, you feel it's kind of like walking into a party. You know, you feel all that. This person down here said that, you know, you throw in a few coins, ding, ding, ding. I enjoyed it. I had fun. It was someone on the Vegas Strip. So it's everything that lures folks in, you know. It's just not the machine or the gambling itself. It's the environment. And then when you're opening the doorway to oblivion, it's kind of like someone who has the genetic predisposition, or especially when it's coupled with a traumatic event early in their life, and they know that hey, I can use this just to forget for a while. That progresses, right? And this particular person actually had a comorbid condition, opiate addiction. And my fear, if I was their, you know, their clinician, you know, their counselor, their therapist, would be a substance relapse to go along with this. Perhaps that might trigger that. I would just keep your eye out on that. Again, I think I said this on the last. You know, I know gamblers who had addiction with gambling who can drink or who drink. And then I know people with substance addictions who gamble. And then I know folks in and out of this field who can't do either or who can do both. It's just, you just have to keep kind of your eye out with comorbid conditions, right? But this is opening the door to oblivion where they actually use it to escape. Trauma that ties the bind, they talk about this having, you know, trauma is very personal and traumatic, of course, but trauma is very, you know, they link the trauma, their personal trauma, their unique experience to the gambling itself. And, you know, it makes that connection, and they almost become, you know, that's just how they deal with it. It becomes unique to their personal trauma. And then gambling can become the trauma itself, meaning money. They gamble, again, to escape that they lost, for instance, with this particular person, $50,000. She didn't want to think about that, so she kept gambling, chasing her tail, you know. So that's the study that ties trauma. I'm sorry I had to kind of rush through that and rush to the end here. I looked down and my time had flown. So perhaps if you want, Lori, we can maybe look at some questions here. I think we're right at the hour here, or a minute before.
Sure, Robby. And for folks who may need to leave us right away because you have something scheduled for 1 o'clock, that's fine. Thank you for joining us. And anyone, for the rest of you who can stay for a few minutes while we do questions, that's also great. So Robby, there were a few questions that came in.
Sure.
First, I'll talk about the ones that came in through the chat.
Okay.
And this is something that I have wondered about myself. You know, when we talk about genders, we so often only talk about two genders.
Right.
Do you know where there is information and data related to non-binary people or people who don't identify as male or female?
Great question. And we actually, and yeah, I did. That's why I kind of positioned it as, you know, two of the genders. Great question. And I don't, we do have a training that covers the LGBTQ population. And you know what, I don't even think, I'm just going to be totally transparent, I don't even think we went into the actual rates, but maybe I can look into that and get you an answer so that we can get this person their answer via email. I'm sure there are some stats out there or statistics beyond the male-female realm with gender, right, that connect. I'm trying to think back to the LGBTQ population that we do cover. There was a connection that we made that that some do use gambling as an escape from everything that the challenges that someone you know, either in this population goes to. But I don't know any specific numbers or resource. But let me check for a resource for you.
That would be great. If you could
Sure.
send some resources my way, I'll make sure
Absolutely.
to get them out to the group. That was a great question.
Very good question. Yep.
Someone is, no, first of all, and I didn't mention, you're going to send me your slides later, and I will include those also in an email to folks.
Sure.
So people have been asking about that. Could we get links to those COVID resources that you referred to?
Sure. You know what? And those COVID resources, I don't mind saying they were like a couple of gambling, I think, magazine. But I will give you. I think there. Let me flip through here. Yeah, they're in the references, but there were two. Let's see here. Was it this page? I will see, but one was www.payments.com, and I think it was, and then there was another one here, female gambling. But yeah, I can just send you, I can copy just the reference here. I did a simple search on this because I wanted to find out what was going on, with the online thing versus casinos, and I thought those two were had some importance to what we're seeing in the trends as far as brick and mortar casinos and what's going on there, and then with the online gambling. But both of those stood out to me, so I picked those out. But I can get you I guess the websites or wherever I found those. Yeah.
Sure, great. And that's one of those things, it's such an emerging topic that there are new reports coming out, and sometimes they conflict, which kind of comes to one of the other questions, which is, are we seeing an increase in gambling during COVID-19? And I feel like I've seen conflicting stories about that. Some resources are saying yes, and some are saying no. So do you have more to add to that, Robby?
No, I agree with you, Lori, and that's why, I wanted to say that with it this fresh, it's going to be hard to find something really consistent, and frankly, with a great source too, So, I mean, I'm just being honest with you, but I do know that online, and last week I hosted for another state, Dr. Jeff Deravinsky, and we had even talked about online growth, and it's obviously growing, but I don't know, then you'll see something conflicting, but I don't know if I've seen anything say that it's not growing. But that blanket statement is easy because it was growing before COVID, right? So I'm with you. I agree with what you just said. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, I know some states, including Maine, are having fewer calls to the problem gambling helpline.
Yep.
But I was talking to Brianne Dora from the National Council on Problem Gambling on Friday, and we were talking about the fact that doesn't necessarily mean gambling's down. It could mean that those people are calling different hotlines right now. For example, suicide hotlines or mental health hotlines. Just because they're not calling the problem gambling hotlines doesn't mean they're not out there.
Yeah, there is so much that goes into the gambling lines and folks who call and how we read that data. Now, I can speak from experience because we handle 8 states, and I look at that just like the fact that I said about the female gamblers. I mean, if you were to just go by that number, but you have to remember that a female gambler or females, I think, are smarter than males. I'm just joking or kind of serious, but
is your wife in the background?
Exactly.
Is that why
she
you
can
just
hear me.
said that?
She can hear me. But no, they reach out for help a lot of times, not in every instance, of course, but a lot of times they're more apt to find help. So with saying that, it's almost showing 50-50 now, but I do believe the gap's continuing to grow. But with saying that, we look at this data because in all the states that we serve, we're seeing the same thing. But they're reducing by different parts for each state. But for the most part, we're seeing big, and I don't know why. And it's going to take some time before we get some research done on this period in time of why. And I agree with what she was saying. They could be calling, and they could be calling other helplines. They could be, who knows? because on our lines, we get callers from one state to the other. Not all of them are the residents of that state. It could be there could be multiple reasons that we just don't know yet. It's we're still in it.
Right.
Yeah.
So one more question that I
Sure.
see is, do you expect women to outnumber men in the future, and by how much? And I know that's a hard question to answer. And as a matter of fact, there was actually, I saw something on Twitter this morning, and I'm going to have to read it later, about a study in, I think it was Switzerland or something like that, a different country, where the women gamblers are now outnumbering the men. It was something like 64%.
I'm going to flip to this one page here, and this is something I put together, and I make sure that I let you guys know that my reasons of why I felt from research, not the reasons, if that makes sense, work from research. It was just what I'm seeing, which will add to what I'm going to say. I think the potential is there, yes, because of these potential reasons. I think it wouldn't surprise me if it does outgrow men, because there's more legalized gambling, and that specific gambling venue expansion. And Lori, you might have knew this or understood this. I just learned this from another executive director from another state told me that these floors are designed for profit, the casino floors. That's why you're seeing more and more machines. Mm-hmm. And if that's making more money, that's going to attract a lot more escape gamblers. So with the technology growth in that particular sector, and then if you go to the end, the women's increased earning power, you see now women winning like poker tournaments now. They're saying, hey, what are the boys doing? I want to try this. And they're successful in it. All this, I think it's opening more and more that it can potentially happen where women will surpass men. I'm not saying it will, but there is the potential for it. And I don't know if there was, let's say it does happen. I don't think it will be by much. I don't think it's going to go to what men to women were even 10, 15 years ago. But I think it could match and maybe exceed by a small amount.
Yeah. One more very quick question. Someone just put in the question and answer. Do you think that as we see sports betting expansion increase, will we see younger women engage in the activity, and will that skew the data?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think legalized sports gambling is going to change some things. Well, look at how fantasy football just alone has kind of changed some things. Females becoming a team with their spouse, and having fun with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if that could lead to something else, right? They could say, hey, I kind of, we'll call it, well, I won't call it this rush I'm feeling is kind of cool. Maybe I'll try this. I think with legalized sports gambling, it's something that maybe might change some things, just not with gender, right. Not just with gender. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we should wrap it up. Thanks everyone who stayed late, including you, Robby.
Oh, no worries.
I'll be sending out that email later on today with the eval, and then be watching later on in the week or early next week for the resources and the certificates. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great afternoon and stay safe.
Thanks everybody for having me. Thank you again, Lori. Everybody have a safe, healthy week.